Dona Tereza was 63 years old, with hair as white as the cornmeal mush she made every Thursday afternoon, and a heart that carried too much love for such a small body. She lived for decades in the big city, where she raised her son, washed other people's clothes, cooked for strangers, and saved penny by penny so that Marcos could study and become someone she could never be. And Marcos became someone. He graduated in law, married a girl from a wealthy family, bought an apartment with a balcony and a double garage. Teresa was proud of him as one is proud of the sun that rises even without having planted the day. But the sun sometimes forgets those who stayed awake waiting for it to arrive. It was on a Wednesday in March, during a dinner that Marcos called an important conversation, that Teresa discovered that the place she thought was hers had already been given to others. Mom, Renata and I talked a lot. The boys are growing up. The house is small. And, the apartment can't hold us anymore. Teresa looked at her son, at the hands she had washed so many times, at the mouth she had fed with sacrifice, and she waited. She always waited. We're thinking about renovating the extra room, making a space for the boys to study, and it would be good if you had a more suitable place. A nursing home, for example. There are some very good ones, with a pool, activities. Marcos, she said her son's name only twice. She didn't shout, she didn't cry there in front of him. She swallowed the knot that rose in her throat as one swallows a bitter medicine all at once, with dignity. That night, Teresa lay awake staring at the ceiling of the little room that had been hers for 40 years. The same little room from which she left at 5 in the morning to work, where she prayed before sleeping, where she heard, through the thin wall, the laughter of the grandchildren she adored, but who rarely had time to sit beside her. And for the first time in many years, she thought of her homeland. She thought of the smell of wet earth after the rain, of the sound of crickets, of the river that cut through the field like a silver ribbon. She thought of her mother, who had already passed, and of the adobe house where she was born, and of the guava tree in the backyard that was probably still there, firm, faithful, waiting. And she thought of Bento. Bento, she murmured in the dark, like someone lighting a candle after a long time without light. Bento had been the love of her youth, the love she left behind when she was 22 years old, when she believed that the big city would give her and the child she carried in her womb a better life. Bento had stayed on the land, with his hands in the soil and a broken heart. She never knew what had become of him. The next morning, Teresa woke up early, as always. She made coffee. She folded the clothes she had. She put into the worn leather suitcase that had accompanied her since the 70s everything that belonged to her, which wasn't much, because those who work for others rarely accumulate more than memories. She left a note on the kitchen table. It wasn't a note of resentment. It was a note of love, because Teresa only knew how to write with love, even when she was bleeding inside. Marcos, my son, I love you today, and I will love you forever. But a mother's love is not synonymous with invisibility. I'm going back to where my roots still keep my name. Take care of yourself. Take care of the boys. And one day, when you have time, remember that I existed. Your mother, Teresa. She took the first bus, leaving for the countryside at 6 in the morning, while the city disappeared through the foggy window. The first tears ran down Dona Teresa's wrinkled face, silent, dignified, just like her. And while she cried, she didn't know that life was, at that exact moment, preparing something for her that she had given up waiting for. The dirt road began where the asphalt ended, and there to something else began inside Teresa, a kind of different breathing, deeper, as if the air of the countryside had more oxygen than that of the city. Her feet still remembered every stone on that path, even after 40 years. The village was small, as she had left it, but different. There was a new pharmacy, a school painted yellow, a health post that hadn't existed before. The children played in the dirt streets with the same freedom as always, and the jacarandas still bloomed in intense purple on the sidewalks, indifferent to time, faithful to the season. Teresa got off the bus with her leather suitcase and stopped in the middle of the square. The world kept turning. People passed by her without knowing that this white-haired woman was a lost daughter who had returned. That every cobblestone in that square carried the imprint of her childhood steps, that she had given her first kiss behind the church. That was right there, on the left side, with the towers slightly tilted by time. Ma'am, do you need help? Do you need help? It was a 12-year-old girl with braids and rubber sandals, holding a clay pot. Yes, my daughter. Tereza smiled, and it was the first genuine smile in many days. I'm looking for the house of the Rios family. It was near the stream, if I'm not mistaken. The girl frowned. The Rios family house. There isn't one around here, ma'am, but up there, on the big farm, lives Mr. Bento. His last name is Rios. Everyone knows. Fazenda, Boa, it belongs to Mr. Bento Rios. He's a good man. He always helps everyone here. Tereza walked slowly to Dona Cecilia Essen, which by some miracle still existed, still smelled of wax and basil, and there she spent her first night back. She couldn't sleep well. Her heart wouldn't let her. The next morning, she woke up with the birds, and she decided. The road to Fazenda, Boa Esperanza, climbed through green pastures and sugarcane fields. It was still early. The morning mist covered the grass like a transparent veil. Tereza went on foot, as she had always done all her life, with her own feet, at her own pace. When she saw the carved wooden gate with the initials B and R, she stopped. Her hands trembled. She didn't know what to say. She didn't know if he would remember her. She didn't know if he would want to see her. 40 years is a very long time. Time that erases names, changes faces, hardens hearts. But before she could retreat, she heard footsteps on the porch. And a voice. Good afternoon. It was him. Older, of course. Completely white hair, neatly trimmed beard, thick hands of someone who had worked the land his whole life. But the eyes were the same. Brown, deep, with that spark she had learned to love when she was 17 and still didn't know the weight life could have. Bento looked at her and stopped. Time stopped with him. Tereza. The voice came out hoarse, like someone retrieving a word stored for decades. Tereza and Tereza, who had crossed 40 years, a cruel city, rejection from her own son, 800 kilometers. A dusty road, simply replied, "It's me, Bento. I've come back." Bento descended the porch steps slowly, as someone afraid the vision would disappear if he moved too fast. He stopped a meter away from her. He looked at her white hair, her tired hands, the worn leather suitcase, and then he looked into her eyes. And in her eyes he found the same 17-year-old girl who had left on a winter morning without properly saying goodbye, and who had taken with her a part of his heart that no other woman, in the 40 years that followed, had managed to fill. "Come in, Tereza." He opened the gate with the same hand that had planted, harvested, and built an entire life. "This house has always had an empty place waiting for you. I never knew how to explain why. Now, Ido." And there, among the singing of the birds and the smell of wet earth, Dona Tereza felt for the first time in many years that she was finally in the right place. The days at Fazenda Boa Esperanza smelled of coffee brewed in a cloth filter, of bread baking in the wood oven, of damp grass at dawn. Tereza woke before the sun, a lifelong habit, and sat on the veranda watching the field awaken. Bento always appeared with 2 cups. At first, they talked little. Time had placed many things between them. Unspoken hurts, paths not shared, absences that hurt more than presence. But the silence between them was not the kind that weighs. It was the kind that rests. Little by little, the stories came out. Bento told her he had waited for her 4 years, that once he even took a bus to the big city to try to find her, but got off at the station, saw the crowd, and felt the city was too big and he too small to find someone who didn't want to be found. That he returned without trying. That for a long time he thought he had done wrong. It wasn't wrong, Bento. Teresa looked at the field. I was the one who was wrong. I thought distance would make me better. That fighting alone, I would prove something. But to whom? To myself. I wasted too much time proving things to no one. He told her he never married. Not for lack of opportunity. There were women. Yes, good and honest women. But there was something in him that simply didn't fit with anyone. Something that remained waiting, nameless, for decades. The heart has its own memory, he said, and that was all he needed to say. Teresa told him about Marcos, about the 40 years of work, about the note she left on the kitchen table. While she spoke, she expected the pain to come, that sharp pain of rejection. But what came was different. A kind of understanding, bitter but real, that her son had grown up without learning certain things that she, perhaps, should have taught differently. The fault isn't only his. Bento. I worked so hard to give him what I didn't have that I forgot to give him what cannot be bought. There's still time to give it. Teresa. How so? Love doesn't expire. You can call him tomorrow. You can send a letter. You can wait, but you don't need to carry that hurt alone for the rest of your life. She remained silent for a long time. The sun was high. The cows grazed peacefully in the field, and the pair of swallows flew in circles over the roof of the farm. You were always wise, Bento. No, I just spent a lot of time thinking. He smiled, and the wrinkles of his smile were beautiful, like furrows in good soil. Whoever stays alone for a long time thinks too much. 3 weeks later, Marcos arrived at the farm. He had found the note. He had spent days with it folded in his suit pocket, opening and closing it, reading and rereading it. He had argued with his wife. He had spent an entire night staring at the ceiling, trying to remember the last time he had simply sat beside his mother without haste. He couldn't remember. When he got out of the rented car, in front of the carved wooden gate, he saw his mother on the veranda with a cup in her hand, and a white-haired man beside her. Teresa stood up slowly. Her son walked with uncertain steps, like someone who doesn't quite know what he will find or what he will say. When he got close enough, he stopped. Mom. Teresa looked at her son, at the dark circles he didn't abe before, at the loosened tie, at the hands she had washed so many times, now nervous, rubbing one against the other. And she did what she knew how to do. She opened her arms. Marcos came, and when he reached his mother's embrace, he'd an adult, lawyer, a father of 2 children, cried like the child he would always be in her presence. He cried with that deep cry. The kind men learn to hide, and that only appears when the heart can no longer pretend. Forgive me, Mom. I shouldn't have. It's already past, my son. But I was unfair. I was cruel. You did so much for me, and I... Marcos. She took her son's face between her hands, the same hands that had rocked him, fed him, cured his fevers, applauded his graduation. I love you. That doesn't change. It never changed. But you need to learn one thing. What? That love needs to be cared for. It's not just feeling. It's seeing. It's showing up. It's showing up. It's remembering that the person exists before they need to leave for you to miss them. Marcos remained quiet. Bento, discreetly, went inside the house to give them space. Mother and son stayed on the veranda for hours, talking, remembering, crying sometimes, laughing at other moments, with that laughter that only exists between people who truly love each other and who finally found the courage to be honest. That night, Bento made dinner for 3. The farm table, which had so often held only his solitary silence, now overflowed with voices, stories, and a warmth He had forgotten how good it was to have. After dinner, while Marcos slept in the guest room, Teresa and Bento stayed on the veranda, looking at the stars. The sky in the countryside is generous with the stars. There are no buildings to cover them, no neon lights to dim them. They all appear, without shame. Hasta sohol, Teresa. She turned to him. He wasn't looking at the stars. He was looking at her, not as a visitor, not as a passing thing stay for real. This farm is too big for one person. This life is too big for one person. And I. His voice trembled a little, with that tremor of someone saying something kept for too long. I don't want to spend any more mornings without those 2 cups of coffee. Teresa looked at the dark field, at the stars, at the man beside her. She thought of the 40 years that had passed, of the son who had returned, of the land that had waited. And she thought that sometimes life takes a long, painful, winding detour, not to lose you, but to bring you back to the right place at the right moment, with enough maturity to recognize the value of what was given. Yes, Bento. She took his large, calloused hand between hers, and there, under the stars of her homeland, with the farm asleep around them and her son sleeping inside, Dona Teresa understood that what seemed to be the end of a story was, in fact, the beginning of the most beautiful chapter of her life. The pain that had brought her there had a name and an address, but the joy she found had no measure. How many times in life do we confuse an ending with a new beginning? How many times was the greatest pain we felt actually the door that led us to where we were meant to be? Dona Teresa was rejected by her own son, and that rejection, which could have destroyed her, was what returned her to her essence, to her roots, to the love she had left behind, because she believed that far away would be better. Perhaps the deepest lesson of this story is not about Teresa, Bento, or Marcos. Perhaps it is about us, about how we often take for granted the love of those who love us the most, about how we expect people to always be there, always available, always waiting until one day they are no longer there. Look around you. Is there someone you love who is being treated as invisible? Is there someone waiting for you to remember they exist before they leave? And you yourself, have you returned to your roots, to what really matters, to the love that may be waiting for you, quiet and faithful, exactly where you left it. Sometimes what seems like sadness is just the road that leads us to the joy we deserve. Did you like this story? If this story touched your heart, subscribe to the channel and leave your comment below. Tell us, which part of the story moved you the most? Your opinion is very important.